A father is not the man who arrives too late. He is the one who never lets you face the storm alone. The little boy's clear voice carried across the frozen courtyard, silencing every noble, every guard, and every servant gathered beneath the silver banners of Moonhaven. Ethan stood protectively in front of his twin sister, Emma, his small shoulders squared with a courage far beyond his years. Across from them, Alpha King Damian Blackwood could barely breathe. 5 years of searching had led him to this moment, yet the first words he heard from the son he never knew existed struck deeper than any blade ever could. "You left our mother," Ethan said quietly. "You don't get to call yourself our father now." Damian's silver eyes shifted toward the woman standing several feet behind the twins. Evelyn Carter looked exactly as she had in his memories, though time had softened the innocence in her face into quiet strength. The wind lifted loose strands of her chestnut hair while she gently rested one hand on Emma's shoulder, saying nothing. She no longer looked like the shy young woman who once believed destiny could never make mistakes. She looked like someone who had survived them. Standing beside her was another king. Lucian Ashthorne, the Lycan King, wore no crown today. He needed none. His calm presence alone carried the weight of ancient authority. He did not step between Damian and the children, nor did he speak a single threatening word. He simply remained close enough that the twins instinctively leaned toward him without realizing it. That simple movement shattered something inside Damian. They trusted another man the way they should have trusted him. Snow drifted quietly across the courtyard as dozens of wolves waited for one king to challenge the other. Instead, only silence answered them. Damian lowered his gaze to the twins again. The boy had his stubborn determination, but Emma's bright blue eyes mirrored Evelyn's gentle heart so perfectly that he felt the years he had lost pressing against his chest. How many birthdays had he missed? How many bedtime stories? How many quiet victories and frightened nights had passed without him ever knowing? Evelyn finally looked into his eyes. There was no hatred there. Somehow that hurt even more. Only distance. Only acceptance. Only the quiet understanding that some wounds did not need anger to remain real. 5 years earlier, on the night everything fell apart, Damian believed Evelyn had walked away from him forever. He never knew she had carried 2 tiny heartbeats with her into the darkness, believing she would never see him again. 5 years earlier, the royal palace had glowed beneath the full moon as though destiny itself had chosen that night to bless the kingdom. Yet Evelyn Carter remembered only the silence that followed sunrise. She had waited outside the eastern balcony where Damian Blackwood had promised they would speak before the council announced their future together. Every minute felt longer than the last. Servants hurried through marble halls with lowered eyes. Noble families whispered behind embroidered fans. No one would meet her gaze for more than a heartbeat. Then she heard the rumor. The Alpha King had spent the night in the West Wing with Olivia Carter, Evelyn's older sister. At first she laughed softly, convinced it had to be another cruel palace story. Damian would never betray her. He had looked into her eyes beneath the sacred moon tree only days before and promised that no title, no council, and no ancient law would ever matter more than the bond they shared. She believed every word. Then Olivia appeared. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from tears she refused to explain. Members of the royal council surrounded her with expressions that looked strangely satisfied, as though a difficult problem had finally been solved. Evelyn searched desperately for Damian, but he never came. She waited another hour, then another. Finally, an elderly servant quietly placed a folded cloak over her shoulders against the morning chill. "My lady," he whispered with genuine sadness. "Sometimes the kindest thing a heart can do is leave before someone asks it to stay." Those words broke whatever hope she still carried. Without speaking to anyone, Evelyn walked through the palace gates with nothing except a small leather satchel and the silver pendant her late mother had given her as a child. She did not know that hidden political bargains had trapped Damian inside emergency meetings all morning. She did not know that powerful elders were carefully controlling every message leaving the royal residence. She only knew that the man she loved had never come for her. By sunset she had crossed the northern bridge beyond the kingdom, determined never to return. Days became weeks. The cold autumn air gradually surrendered to winter, and the exhaustion she felt each morning refused to disappear. When an elderly healer living near the border village gently rested a hand against Evelyn's wrist, the old woman's warm smile appeared almost immediately. "You are not walking alone anymore," she said softly. Evelyn frowned in confusion until the healer guided her trembling hand to her own heartbeat, before placing it lower against her abdomen. Tears filled Evelyn's eyes as the truth settled quietly inside her soul. Then the healer listened once more, her smile growing even brighter. "Not one heartbeat," she whispered. "Two." Evelyn closed her eyes as joy and fear collided within her. She wanted nothing more than to tell Damien, to believe there had been some terrible misunderstanding, but every memory of that lonely palace morning reminded her that he had chosen another path. So she made a promise beneath the falling snow. Whether their father ever returned or not, these children would grow up surrounded by kindness instead of regret, and no crown would ever decide how deeply they deserved to be loved. The small cottage at the edge of Pine Hollow never appeared on any royal map, and that was exactly how Evelyn wanted it. Hidden between towering evergreens and bordered by a narrow stream that sparkled beneath the morning sun, it became the first place that truly felt like home since she had walked away from the palace. Every sunrise began the same way. She gathered fresh herbs from the hillside while Ethan and Emma chased butterflies across the meadow, their laughter carrying farther than the church bells from the neighboring village. The people there knew her only as a quiet widow who preferred simple living. No one questioned the missing husband. No one asked why the twins carried themselves with an unusual confidence that seemed far older than their years. Evelyn never corrected their assumptions. Peace had become more valuable than the truth. As the seasons passed, the twins grew into remarkable children. Ethan possessed an instinct to protect everyone around him, always placing himself between his sister and any danger no matter how small. Emma, on the other hand, had a gift for calming frightened animals with nothing more than her gentle voice and patient smile. Injured birds landed beside her without fear. Stray wolves wandered close to the cottage only to rest peacefully before disappearing back into the forest. Even the village healer quietly admitted she had never witnessed children so naturally connected to the world around them. Sometimes, when moonlight poured through the windows, Evelyn caught faint silver patterns shimmering across the twins' skin before fading with the dawn. She kept those moments locked inside her heart. She remembered too well the stories of powerful bloodlines and ambitious rulers. If anyone discovered who their father truly was, the quiet life she had fought to build could disappear overnight. Yet hiding the truth became more difficult with every passing year. Ethan constantly asked questions that no ordinary child his age would think to ask. Why did strangers sometimes stare at him as though they recognized him? Why did wolves never growl when he approached? Why did Emma always know when storms were coming before the clouds appeared? Evelyn answered each question with a gentle smile and another lesson about kindness, believing character mattered more than destiny. Deep inside, however, uncertainty followed her like a shadow. Hundreds of miles away, Damien Blackwood lived inside a palace that had never felt emptier. The council celebrated successful treaties, prosperous harvests, and peaceful borders, but none of those victories reached the quiet room where the Alpha King spent many evenings alone. Evelyn's silver pendant remained locked inside a carved wooden box on his desk. It had been found beneath the sacred moon tree the morning after she disappeared. Every night he opened the box, hoping somehow the answers he had searched for during 5 endless years would finally appear. Scouts had crossed kingdoms, climbed mountain trails, and questioned merchants from distant ports. Every report ended the same way. No sign of Evelyn Carter. Damien refused to believe she had simply vanished. Somewhere beyond the borders of his kingdom, the woman he had never stopped loving was living a life he could no longer imagine, while 2 children with his silver eyes and her unwavering heart laughed beneath the same sky, completely unaware that fate had already begun guiding every step back toward the family that destiny had separated but had never truly abandoned. The answer arrived on an ordinary spring morning wrapped inside the smallest of miracles. Evelyn was gathering wildflowers near the stream while Ethan and Emma skipped smooth stones across the water, laughing each time another ripple stretched toward the opposite bank. Then every bird in the forest suddenly fell silent. Even the breeze seemed to pause among the pine branches. From somewhere beyond the trees came the slow sound of approaching footsteps, calm and unhurried, carrying a quiet confidence that made the entire forest feel as though it were waiting for someone important to arrive. A tall man emerged between the sunlit pines dressed in a dark traveling coat dusted with miles of road. His silver hair reflected the morning light, and his calm blue eyes swept across the clearing without the slightest hint of suspicion or fear. Evelyn instinctively stepped closer to the twins, her heart quickening. The stranger stopped several feet away and offered a respectful nod instead of another step forward. "Forgive the interruption," he said with a warm voice that carried surprising gentleness. "My horse wandered farther than I expected. I was hoping to ask whether there is fresh water nearby." Before Evelyn could answer, Emma pointed happily toward the stream. "It is right there." The man smiled, but instead of walking immediately toward the water, he noticed a tiny fox trembling beneath a fallen branch nearby. Its front paw had become trapped between tangled roots. Without hesitation he carefully knelt, speaking in a soothing tone until the frightened animal slowly relaxed. Ethan watched with wide eyes as the stranger gently lifted the branch away, and allowed the fox to run back into the forest without attempting to touch it again. "You helped it even though it could not thank you," Ethan said. The man smiled again. "Kindness does not become more valuable because someone notices it." Evelyn studied him carefully. There was something strangely familiar about his quiet strength. Unlike the proud noble she had once known, this traveler seemed completely comfortable allowing silence to fill the spaces between words. He introduced himself simply as Lycan Ashthorn, a traveler from the northern mountains. He offered no grand titles and asked for no special treatment. Yet every instinct Evelyn possessed whispered that he was hiding far more than his name. As they shared fresh bread and warm tea beneath the old oak tree outside the cottage, Emma laughed more than she had in weeks. Ethan eagerly asked Lycan endless questions about distant forests, mountain lakes, and winter skies. To Evelyn's surprise, Lycan answered every question with genuine patience, never speaking down to the children or treating their curiosity as childish. When the afternoon sun began sinking behind the hills, Lycan quietly thanked Evelyn for her hospitality and prepared to leave. Before he mounted his horse, he paused for one thoughtful moment. "There is something unusual about your children," he said softly. Evelyn's breath caught, but his expression remained kind. "Not because of power," he continued, "because they choose compassion before strength. That is rarer than any gift the world can offer." After he disappeared beyond the forest trail, Emma looked up at her mother with bright eyes. "Will he come back?" she asked. Evelyn gazed toward the empty path where the stranger had vanished. She did not know why, but for the first time in 5 years, the quiet life she had built no longer felt untouched by destiny. Somewhere beyond the mountains, the man who called himself a traveler carried secrets as ancient as the moon itself, and although Evelyn could not yet understand why fate had brought him to her doorstep, she could already feel that the peaceful rhythm of their lives had begun to change. 3 days passed before Lycan returned, and by then the twins had already begun watching the forest trail every morning as though they somehow knew he would appear again. He arrived carrying nothing more than a woven basket filled with fresh mountain berries and warm bread from a village several miles away. Ethan greeted him with the excitement reserved for an old friend instead of a stranger, while Emma proudly presented the tiny garden she had planted beside the cottage. Lycan admired every flower as though each one deserved its own story, asking thoughtful questions that made the children smile even wider. Evelyn remained cautious. Life had taught her that people rarely appeared without wanting something in return. Yet each visit passed without hidden requests or curious questions about her past. Lycan helped repair the loose fence before a coming rainstorm, stacked firewood without being asked, and quietly departed before sunset. Weeks slipped by, and his presence became a gentle rhythm in their peaceful routine. One cool evening, as golden light settled across the meadow, Ethan raced toward the stream after hearing a frightened whimper echo through the trees. A young wolf with a badly strained leg had become trapped between smooth rocks near the water's edge. Before Evelyn could reach him, Ethan had already knelt beside the frightened animal, speaking softly until it stopped struggling. Emma carefully gathered long reeds while Lycan calmly shifted the surrounding stones just enough to free the wolf without causing additional pain. The frightened creature rested its head against Ethan's shoulder for one brief moment before disappearing into the forest. Lycan watched the twins with quiet wonder. Few children carried such natural compassion, and even fewer possessed the calm presence that could soothe wild creatures so effortlessly. That evening, after the children had fallen asleep beside the fireplace, Lycan stood outside beneath a sky filled with brilliant stars. Evelyn joined him, wrapping a light shawl around her shoulders against the cool mountain breeze. Neither spoke for several minutes. Finally, Lucian broke the silence. "You have protected them well," he said. Evelyn lowered her eyes. "I only wanted them to grow up far from ambition." Lucian nodded slowly. "Sometimes the world finds remarkable people no matter how carefully they hide." His words unsettled her more than she wished to admit. "Who are you really?" she asked quietly. Lucian smiled with unmistakable sadness. "A man who has spent many years learning that crowns often make simple lives impossible." Before Evelyn could ask another question, distant hoofbeats echoed through the valley. A lone rider appeared at the edge of the meadow wearing the dark crest of Moonhaven. The exhausted messenger climbed down and respectfully bowed before Evelyn. "My lady," he said, struggling to catch his breath. "Forgive me for bringing unwanted news, but the Alpha King has reopened every search across the Northern Territories. He believes you are alive, and he has sworn he will not stop until he finds you." The messenger departed before sunrise, leaving behind only silence. Evelyn stood at the cottage window long after dawn, watching Ethan and Emma laugh together beneath the old oak tree. Behind her, Lucian quietly understood that the peaceful season they had shared was drawing to an end. Somewhere beyond the distant mountains, destiny had finally awakened, and this time it was walking toward their little family with steady, unavoidable steps. The ride back to the northern mountains was the longest Lucian Ashthorne had taken in years, not because the distance had changed, but because his thoughts refused to leave the little cottage hidden among the pines. Every mile carried the memory of Ethan's fearless kindness, Emma's gentle laughter, and the quiet strength in Evelyn's eyes. He had crossed countless kingdoms during his lifetime, yet he had never encountered a family whose greatest gift was not power, but compassion. When he finally entered the ancient stone fortress overlooking the Lycan Highlands, the royal council immediately sensed something had changed. Maps covered the great oak table, and messengers waited with reports from neighboring realms, but Lucian's attention settled on only one parchment. It bore the seal of Moonhaven. The Alpha King had expanded his search into every bordering territory, offering generous rewards for any trustworthy information regarding Evelyn Carter. Lucian read the document twice before folding it carefully. He did not see the determination of a ruler chasing lost pride. He saw the desperation of a man searching for someone he had never truly forgotten. Across the mountains, Damian Blackwood stood inside the palace archives surrounded by dusty records that had not been opened for decades. What had begun as a search for Evelyn had quietly become something else. Tiny details that once seemed meaningless now formed an unsettling pattern. Palace schedules had been altered without his approval on the night Evelyn disappeared. Trusted guards had been reassigned. Private letters had vanished from the royal records. Most troubling of all, every order traced back to the same group of senior council members who had claimed they were protecting the stability of the kingdom. Damian summoned Olivia Carter, expecting anger or excuses. Instead, she entered the chamber carrying years of visible regret. Tears filled her eyes before he asked a single question. "I never wanted you to believe I came between you and Evelyn," she whispered. "They told me you were in danger. They said if I refused their plan, the kingdom would fall into civil conflict. I believed them because I was afraid." Damian listened in stunned silence as Olivia revealed how the elders had separated everyone involved that morning, preventing messages from reaching either him or Evelyn. She admitted she had spent years searching for her younger sister as well, ashamed that fear had allowed others to manipulate them all. When she finished speaking, the room remained painfully quiet. Damian finally understood that the greatest betrayal had never come from the woman he loved or from her sister. It had come from people who believed they could control destiny through deception. Hundreds of miles away, Evelyn noticed the first signs that their peaceful valley was changing. Travelers had become more frequent. Strangers occasionally paused near the village asking harmless questions about families living in the surrounding forests. None of them appeared threatening, but the timing unsettled her. One evening, as she tucked Ethan and Emma into bed, Ethan looked up with unusual seriousness. "Mother," he asked softly, "if someone spent a long time trying to find us, does that mean they stopped loving us before, or that they never stopped?" Evelyn gently brushed his hair away from his forehead, but no answer came. Outside the cottage window, Lucian stood quietly beneath the stars, understanding that the truth was finally moving toward them from every direction, and when it arrived, every heart would be forced to choose between the pain of the past and the hope of a different future. Morning fog drifted across Pine Hollow like a quiet promise, softening the outlines of the towering pines while sunlight slowly painted the meadow in shades of gold. To Ethan and Emma, it was another ordinary day filled with lessons, laughter, and simple adventures. To the adults watching over them, every peaceful moment had become something to treasure, because each sunrise carried the feeling that change was drawing closer. Lucian spent the morning teaching Ethan how to recognize animal tracks along the forest floor, explaining that true strength began with understanding, rather than domination. Emma wandered beside Evelyn gathering wild herbs, carefully naming each plant exactly as her mother had taught her. Looking at them together, Evelyn almost allowed herself to believe that destiny had finally grown tired of testing her heart. That fragile hope lasted until an unfamiliar carriage appeared at the edge of the valley shortly after noon. It bore no royal crest, only the markings of traveling merchants. The elderly couple inside requested fresh water and a place to rest before continuing south. Evelyn welcomed them with the same kindness she offered every traveler, unaware that the old man studied Ethan and Emma with growing curiosity. As the twins helped unload small wooden crates, the merchant quietly smiled. "Remarkable children," he said. "The boy carries himself like someone born to protect others. The little girl has eyes that notice everything." Evelyn thanked him politely, but a quiet uneasiness settled inside her. Before leaving, the merchant handed Ethan a carved wooden wolf no larger than his hand. "A gift," he said warmly. "Sometimes life sends reminders that home is not always the place where you begin. Sometimes it is the place where love chooses to remain." After the carriage disappeared beyond the hills, Lucian's expression became unusually thoughtful. He recognized the couple at once. They were not merchants at all, but trusted observers who quietly served neutral kingdoms by carrying information instead of weapons. If they had reached Pine Hollow, others would eventually follow. Hundreds of miles away, Damien received a report unlike any he had seen during 5 years of searching. A traveler described 2 unusually kind children living with a woman whose appearance perfectly matched Evelyn Carter. The report contained no exact location, only scattered landmarks that pointed toward the western valleys near the Lycan Highlands. Damien read every line until the parchment trembled in his hands. Hope after so many years felt almost frightening. He immediately ordered a small escort instead of an army. "No banners," he instructed calmly. "No royal procession. If she truly lives, I will not frighten her again." Back in Pine Hollow, Ethan sat beside Lucian on the cottage porch as evening settled over the valley. "Can I ask you something?" the little boy whispered. Lucian nodded. Ethan looked toward the fading sunlight with quiet seriousness. "If someone made a mistake a long time ago, can they still become a good person later?" Lucian remained silent for several moments before answering. "Every sunrise gives us the chance to become someone better than we were yesterday. The difficult part is whether the people we hurt can believe that change when they finally see it." Ethan slowly nodded, holding the little wooden wolf tightly against his chest. Neither of them noticed Evelyn standing just inside the open doorway. She had heard every word, and for the first time since leaving the palace, she wondered whether forgiveness was something fate asked of every heart, even those that had learned to survive without it. The first leaves of autumn drifted across Pine Hollow when destiny finally reached the valley. Damien Blackwood traveled with only 4 trusted companions, leaving every royal banner behind exactly as he had promised. He wanted no display of authority, only the chance to face the woman whose absence had echoed through every quiet corner of his life for 5 long years. As the narrow forest path opened into the familiar meadow described by countless scattered reports, his heartbeat slowed. There it was. A small cottage surrounded by wildflowers. A weathered fence repaired by careful hands. Children's laughter floating through the crisp afternoon air. For one impossible moment, everything looked so peaceful that he questioned whether he had the right to disturb it at all. Then he saw them. Ethan was helping Emma hang small lanterns beneath the old oak tree while Evelyn smiled from the garden, brushing loose strands of chestnut hair away from her face. The simple happiness before him was more beautiful than every celebration his palace had ever held. Damien took one hesitant step forward, but before he could speak, Ethan noticed the strangers standing near the edge of the meadow. The little boy instinctively moved beside his sister. Emma quietly reached for Evelyn's hand. Lucian emerged from the woods carrying a bundle of firewood, his calm blue eyes immediately meeting Damien's silver gaze across the clearing. Neither king spoke. They simply measured the silence between them. Evelyn slowly turned. The basket slipped gently from her hands, apples rolling through the grass as disbelief washed across her face. Time seemed to stop. Damien wanted to say her name, to explain everything he had discovered, to tell her that not a single sunrise had passed without regret. Yet every carefully prepared word disappeared the instant he looked into her eyes. They were no longer filled with the hopeful certainty he remembered. They carried the quiet wisdom of someone who had survived heartbreak and built a new life from its broken pieces. Lucian calmly placed the firewood beside the porch before walking toward the children. He rested one reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder and another on Emma's without stepping in front of them. His gesture carried no challenge. It simply reminded everyone watching where his first loyalty rested. Damien understood immediately. This was not a rival protecting a prize. This was a man protecting a family he genuinely loved. Finally Damien spoke, his voice quieter than anyone expected from an alpha king. Evelyn, I know an apology cannot return the years I lost. I know I cannot ask you to forget what happened, but I finally know the truth. Evelyn remained silent. Damien slowly removed a small silver pendant from inside his coat, the same pendant she had believed lost forever beneath the sacred moon tree. I kept this with me every single day, he whispered, because I never stopped believing I would find you. Emma looked curiously toward her mother. Ethan glanced at Lucian before returning his eyes to the unfamiliar man whose expression carried more sorrow than pride. The evening breeze stirred the lanterns above them as the valley held its breath. No king reached for power. No voice demanded obedience. In that quiet meadow surrounded by fading sunlight and falling leaves, every heart understood that the greatest battle would not be fought with crowns or ancient titles. It would be decided by truth, forgiveness, and the choice of one woman who had finally learned that her future belonged to no one except herself. No one spoke for what felt like forever. The wind carried the scent of pine through the meadow, while the last rays of sunlight settled across the little cottage that had become the center of 4 different lives. Evelyn looked from Damien to Lucian, then toward the twins waiting quietly beside the old oak tree. For years she had dreamed about this moment, imagining anger, tears, or impossible choices. Instead, she felt an unexpected calm. She stepped forward and gently accepted the silver pendant from Damien's trembling hand. Her fingers traced the familiar engraving before she looked into his eyes. I believe you know the truth now, she said softly. And I believe you never stopped searching. But the years we lost cannot be lived a second time. Damien lowered his head. He understood before she continued. I did not fail because I stopped loving you, Evelyn whispered. I survived because I learned to keep living after believing you were gone. The words settled gently over the meadow, carrying no blame, only honesty. Damien slowly turned toward Ethan and Emma. Kneeling so that his eyes met theirs, he offered a quiet smile filled with hope instead of expectation. I cannot ask you to call me your father today, he said. I have not earned that place in your hearts. But if you will allow it, I would like the chance to know you one day at a time. Ethan studied him carefully before glancing at his mother. Emma reached for Evelyn's hand, then looked toward Lucian. The Lycan King simply smiled and nodded almost imperceptibly, leaving the decision entirely to them. After a long moment, Ethan stepped forward. You can visit, he said with the seriousness only a child could carry. But you have to keep your promises. Damien's eyes filled with grateful tears. I will. Emma smiled warmly and held out the carved wooden wolf she carried everywhere. Then next time you come, we can have tea together. A quiet laugh spread through the meadow, gentle enough to soften even the weight of old regrets. Evelyn turned toward Lucian. He had never asked her to choose a throne, a title, or even himself. He had simply stood beside her every day when life asked the hardest questions. She reached for his hand, and he accepted it with the same quiet respect that had defined every moment they had shared. Damien watched them without bitterness. At last he understood that love was never something a king could command. It was something earned through presence, patience, and kindness. As twilight settled over Pine Hollow, the twins walked ahead laughing together while Evelyn and Lucian followed side by side. Damien remained beneath the old oak tree for one final moment before turning toward the road home, carrying sorrow for the years he had lost but gratitude that he had finally found the family destiny had never truly taken away. Beneath the first stars of the evening sky, every heart began a different journey, proving that the greatest victory is not reclaiming the past, but choosing compassion for the future.